Testing. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you for your patience. I've never done this before. I had some technical difficulties. Oh, okay. So you can hear me. Wonderful. Okay, wow. I'm a little flustered. Okay, this is really weird. There's like a delay. Okay, we're going to talk about spring 2025. If you have questions, ask them. I can't guarantee when I will get to them because sometimes I get carried away talking. And also, I'm a slow talker, so this is scary for me. So this spring, I'm not going to talk about the Aries inception chart. That could be a whole other video. So I'm just going to get right into it. This spring begins in between eclipses during a Venus retrograde and a Mercury retrograde. So spring begins like liquid metal. Oh, great. You guys are nice. That's good to know. Spring begins at like kind of a turning point. And first I'll talk about how it's in between eclipses. This spring is a bigger transition than usual. Also, I'm truly riffing. So I didn't prepare a script for this. I just know what I'm going to talk about. I'm a slow talker, and sometimes it takes me a long time to gather my thoughts. Like, I'll get a deer in headlights look, and it'll take me a while to start saying something. So this spring begins in more of a transition liquid period than normal. We're in between eclipses. We're in a Venus retrograde and a Mercury retrograde before the conjunction, which are Mercury retrograde before the conjunction is typically the glitchiest part. It's the part where there's the most potential for messing things up by trying to fix them. And the same with the same with Venus retrograde. And I have a whole video on this Venus retrograde. And there will be one on the Mercury retrograde. So we're in between eclipses. Mercury is retrograde. Venus is retrograde. I still can't. I think it's like a little bit of both, whether like a Mercury retrograde, for instance, in between eclipses is like, because in between eclipses is like a time of extreme change. If you make an important decision in between eclipses, like we'll have the tendency to do, because emotions are very heightened and eclipses bring about change that is like been lying dormant for a while, but it's like change that wants to happen, that needs to happen, and sometimes it like leaps out and will happen for you before you feel ready. Even if you make the decision to be like, I want this change, you might like regret that decision immediately if you do it in between eclipses. So it's a tricky time on its own. Then we have Mercury retrograde. So I'm still undecided on whether or not, and it's probably both, whether like Mercury is retrograde in between eclipses. So, and it's half of this period is before the conjunction. So you could have the opportunity to make huge change in your life. But I would be careful about doing that intentionally. It's normally, I wouldn't advise doing intentional stuff right now. And like, stuff is going to happen. You don't have to make things happen during this time. Oh, great. You had an invincibility sync. I love that. Wow, the chat is distracting. In a fun way. Okay, so this is a crazy time. Spring begins with a bang. There's a lot of, it's like, be careful. It's kind of like walking on a tightrope or managing the balance. There are a lot of plates spinning. There have been over the past few months. But eclipses bring change that you're not ready for. We have a lot of outer planets, as you know. Like, if you follow any type of astrology, I'm not saying anything new. You're just getting like my version of like going through the motions, talking about it. There are a lot of outer planet sign changes that happen this spring. And that signals like you're going to be able to look back and see how this was an era, what's been going on. And what we're stepping into is a different era. And a lot of that change could be like a feeling of things being taken away. For instance, we have, before springtime, we have a lunar eclipse on the south node in Virgo. So if we think of the moon as the activator of the zodiac, the moon brings things into manifestation. It makes things real. It makes physical things alive. And if you think of just a quick rundown of the sun and the moon as our luminaries, I was beginning to watch I don't know how to say his last name, Chris Rapucci. I don't know. I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but he did this great lecture on the nakshatras because that's his whole thing. And he said something, and I don't remember where he got it because I just started listening to the beginning and then I had to move on. But he was talking about, because astrology is the study of light. The Hindu tradition of astrology is Jyotish, which translates to the science of light. And he said something about how these patterns of light are defined by the sun but remembered by the moon. So the moon is kind of like this physical memory. It like logs what the sun defines. So if you think of the moon as the activator of the zodiac, a full moon is like the light has culminated fully into this physical vessel, this round thing covered in reflective sand. That symbolizes a lot of things like coming into physical being over the course of 2 weeks, a fortnight, or over the course of 6 months, because you can look at, if you watch my weekly presentations, you'll see that every full moon and dark moon, I'll talk about the last, like if it's a full moon coming up, I'll talk about the last full moon in that sign and the last dark moon in that sign and the ones coming up. And those are like 6 months ahead and behind of the given lunation. Anyway, I ramble a lot. I edit my videos a lot because I'm all over the place. So I'm trying to get better at like talking. I'm also a Libra, so I'm way better at talking to like someone else, and I have no one to talk to. I'm just like a Libra alone talking, and it doesn't work. It works so much better. So I'm going to pretend that I'm talking to you. I was going to give you my take on the sun and moon really quick, just to talk about the lunar eclipse, things being taken away, things like rapidly changing in your life. Often that can feel like, even if it's good change, you could feel like you're being deprived of something. And a lunar eclipse on the south node, which is what this is, the south node is like a signature for like deprivation. It can also be like turning away, being disgusted, like, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And if you can't have the, if you aren't able to sort out like what you need to let go of, often, especially if it's activated, like if you're in a Virgo profection this year, or a Mercury ruled profection, or a sun or moon year, it could be that if you're not intentionally turning away from something, something could be taken from you. Or if you're intentionally turning away from the wrong thing just to like do it, and it's not really truly in alignment with what you need to be turning away from, often a lunar eclipse can like take things from you, which I hate saying. I feel like astrology is kind of difficult also because our words are really powerful, and I have a tendency to like go into doom territory with my words. And a lot of times in my weeklies, I edit it out if I'm like, oh, that was too scary, because it will come into being for me. Anyway, it's taking me like 8 minutes to get to talk about the sun and the moon. So the moon is the activator of the zodiac. The sun, the patterns of light, which is information. I want to go on another tangent about light and information. So the sun, everything comes from the sun. Everything comes from the sun, and everything is for the sun. That's how you get these connotations of like the sun being God, or like all of our consciousness being light, loving awareness. And us being like ideas from many traditions of us being extrusions from the same consciousness. So like that's the word namaste, meaning like the light in me acknowledges the light in you. That's what that is. So that has been taken into like cheesy territory and overused and made fun of, but it's actually like a really profound and special thing to recognize when you meet another person, that they're you. So that's the sun. The moon is a body that receives the light of the sun and then is able to use it in the world. So that's how you get the moon is like connected to manifestation, because it literally brings things into physical manifestation. I think there's something in the Eclipse, or it might have been when I was doing the Austin Coppock courses, he wrote like some things that I think came from him that were like calls to the planets, but I didn't understand that. So for a long time, I thought this was from the Eclipse until I tried to find it in the Eclipse a long time ago, and I couldn't. But it was something about like, so he may have, I don't know who wrote this, but it was something about like cycles of generation and corruption. And that comes from like ancient texts too. It's not just like, that exact phrasing, I don't remember where it comes from. So if you know, let me know. Oh, someone just broke up with someone and they should have waited. It's okay. You need to do that. Don't have, you know what I'm going to make it tangent this. So I've never done this before. The chat's very distracting. Sometimes, so I struggle a lot with like, I'll make a decision and then I will regret it. And then I will allow the regret to consume me. And something that I've been working with recently, and it's hard, it's like way easier said than done, is like, if you did something, if you made a decision, that is the decision you needed to make. That is in support of you, not against you. I got that from, that's not my phrasing, that's from Lacey Phillips. But it's in support of you, not against you. Even if you are going to be consumed with regret for a while, you shouldn't have waited. You did it at the right time. Sometimes like that, you're going to regret something, like you get to choose your regrets. So, if you hadn't done it, then that might be eating away at you, like where you should have done it. So I wish you well on that, and I hope that you don't feel bad about it for that long, because it's all going to work out. Even if you go through sometimes like ordeals. Again, this is one of those things where I need to watch my words, because when I say stuff like this, then it happens to me. But my whole life is an ordeal, so ordeals are like initiatory. You'll come out with like, they end up being empowering. Okay, so back to the sun and the moon. So the sun is life. It's like the inner spark that brings things to life. And the moon gives the sun material to bring to life. And if you look at a dead body, you can see how, so like physically, things mean what they mean in astrology because of what they are. The sun, you just see in the sky, it is what it is. It doesn't need to like be anything else. It's a giant ball of fire. That's exactly what it is, and you can see it. And sun ruled people are like that. They are what they are. They're good at like showing you what they are. And then depending on the complications of the chart, sometimes they can show you, things that they're not really well. And that's like how you get great performers. The moon reflects the light of the sun. So if you see a dead body, you can see how it's no longer reflecting the light. So the sun and moon work together. During eclipses, the light gets really weird. So I'm supposed to be talking about all of spring, and I'm talking about something that happens before spring even begins. The lunar eclipse on the south node in Virgo. So during eclipses, the light gets weird. It's like, you know how there are spectrums of light that they are always there, but you can't see them. So, one of those is like the rainbow, and that's wonderful, but that's not what I'm talking about during eclipses. I'm talking more about like infrared and ultraviolet. And in the Hindu tradition of astrology, the planets are called graha, and it means like grab, or kind of like very, very loosely translates to influence. And the nodes, the north node and the south node, Rahu and Ketu, those are the calculated points between the orbit of like the oh my God. This is where, like, if I were recording this, I would go gather my words. Sometimes my words aren't available, even though I know something. So it makes it look like I don't know the answer to an easy question. The nodes are like the intersection between Earth's relationship with the sun and the moon. Those orbits. Doing the deer in headlights thing. Oh, you should have waited to get fired. I'm distracting myself with the chat because I forget what I was saying. Yeah, you should have waited to get fired. I've been fired so many times. I'm like unhireable. Okay. So, eclipses. The light gets weird. This is when like the relationship between the sun, moon, and the earth, they obfuscate each other. And it makes the light strange. Like, you've seen an eclipse in your life, hopefully. And if not, you've heard about it or like seen a picture of it or something. The light gets really strange. And people who are there to witness it, it gets really strange. It gets cold. It's very out of the ordinary. But the big thing is that the light changes. It's like what you can see changes. And that's a part of why emotions are heightened during eclipses. The moon being partially our emotional attunement from stuff that happened in the past. Because the light, eclipses feel disturbing because what we can see, what we can perceive is warped. It's like if you're in a hotel room and you put an ultraviolet light and you can see like all the gross stains that you're not supposed to see, and that's disturbing. And so often insights that we get during eclipses lead us to make crazy decisions. And sometimes those decisions are necessary. I've definitely made some decisions during eclipses that I regretted instantly. They completely changed the course of my life forever. And that's how it works. Oh, so I got on this because, oh great, I'm glad you like the tangential info because that's my specialty. So you get the point that the beginning of the year if you look at my weeklies, I didn't prepare good like calendar chips. Here's March. I didn't prepare that other. Oh wait, I don't know if you can see. Oh, okay, great. You can see it. Sorry, there's a delay. So you can see that spring occurs in between eclipses. There's a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. And spring occurs right in the center, as does... Sorry, this is my mic. As does the interior conjunction of Venus and Mercury. So if you don't know, the interior... so I started talking about eclipses and just like, this is what it is, and explaining like why the lunar eclipse in Virgo has a very like take it away signature, because the moon is like, reflects the light of the sun. Eclipses make the light weird. The south node takes away. The moon, a lunar eclipse, is going to have to do with physical manifestation, like things, concrete things actually happening. Whereas the sun, like a solar eclipse, will have to do with like how you identify with that part of your life. So another reason why this is a big transition time, aside from eclipse season, spring equinox, interplanet retrogrades with like before the interior conjunction, with the interior conjunctions happening in between eclipses, right around the equinox. I'll get to those in a minute. Another reason why this is a very big transition period is the lunar eclipse we're having is in Virgo. The nodes moved into Virgo in early January, Virgo and Pisces. For the past year and a half, we've had the nodes in Libra and Aries, and you can see like the North Node in Aries is really setting up this like glorification of war and all the war that is coming. And the South Node in Libra, I saw it was like it was like a paraphrase of something, of a Bible story of a woman who was inconsolable at the price of peace. And that's what the past year and a half has been about. Like, the North Node is in Aries, so it's not about compromise. And that vibe, it's good for us personally to learn that, obviously. But it's also, you can see a lot of like war building up, and a lot of planets, or a couple of big important planets, are moving into Aries, moving forward. So anyway, the lunar eclipse in Virgo, the lunar eclipse is in Virgo before the spring equinox. And then after the spring equinox, there's a solar eclipse in Aries. And this is the last, so we're in between these like, we're in between eclipses, and we're in between where the eclipses are taking place. And it's like the baton is being handed off, but eclipses are this weird inverted light. So first we get South Node eclipse on Virgo. You'll get the first, if you haven't already, you'll get like the big pieces of information about on what this, like the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Aries, Virgo, South Node in Virgo, mean for you. And then on March 29th, we get a solar eclipse in Aries. So the past year and a half, it's like July 2023, the nodes moved into Aries and Libra. You've been like developing a different relationship with the Aries part of your chart. And if you don't know how to read your own chart, I have a course. It's really long, but if you just do the first part, you can at least look at your chart and see what is where, and Google it. So it's a huge time of change. Eclipses, the equinox, the interior conjunctions. I think I actually talked about that already. So the interior conjunctions of, like on the calendar, you can see the like little sun glyph with the Venus retrograde glyph and the Mercury retrograde glyph. Those mark the center of the retrograde period. So typically that feels like it's always kind of a relief when you get through like to the part. I'm just messing with my hair. When you get to the part of a retrograde period that's past the interior conjunction, it often feels like like you're headed more towards resolution, or you have a little bit more of a footing on what's actually going on and what's actually going wrong, so that you can address it effectively. Again, the time before the conjunction, I said this earlier, so I'm repeating myself, but that's okay. The time before the conjunction, it's a lot easier to make things worse by trying to fix them. So a couple other things that happen right around the equinox is Venus moves back into Pisces. Venus has been retrograde since the 1st, which at the time of this recording is not very long ago. It's just like a few days ago. But by that time, Venus will have been retrograde for a couple weeks, and it's past the conjunction, and now she's moving back into Pisces. So that's going to be a change in tone and kind of a blast from the past. And at the same time, 2 days later, Neptune moves into Aries. So that's right after an eclipse. Because of all the eclipsey stuff that's happened, I think we can expect at least one prominent like geopolitical event during this time, or like a buildup. Things are already building up. You can see it like every couple days now. There's something happening. So I mentioned this in my weekly that that the president of Ukraine was wearing a shirt with a trident on it, which to me is like he's Neptune. Like something happens to him or his country, or he does something. But Neptune moving into Aries partially is about, I could talk for 4 hours on this, but partially it's going to be about like glorifying war, romanticizing war, and romanticizing crime, because Mars has like a crime element. It's like overt. Aries would be like bank robbers, not wearing face masks. Scorpio would be more like jewel thief, cat burglar. But I see that like every astrologer sees that. I mean, and I haven't heard anybody talk about crime, like romanticizing crime, but absolutely war is going to be glorified. So I think like around this time, geopolitically, we'll start to see some of that. Also, with Neptune in Aries, and there's more to this when we get to Saturn in Aries, but just talking about Neptune in Aries, if we look back at Uranus in Aries, which was like 2010 through 2018 roughly, it moved kind of in and out of Aries, 2017, 2018. That was Instagram. That was the selfie. That was our lives becoming our social media profiles. It was like an innovative way to use technology to demonstrate ourselves. And since then, that has become like our way of being. Our way of being is just as much now. Like if you go back to like 2008 or something, our way of being was like in the world. And we had like Facebook at that time. That was like a fun thing we could do. And yeah, it was like building up. But Uranus in Aries was like the time when that like really solidified. And now like our way of being is just as much in our social media profiles as it is in the world. And I don't hear other astrologers talking about this, but like these outer planet transits through Aries are the metaverse. Neptune and Saturn coming into Aries, that is the metaverse. Have you noticed that like on TikTok or like in your iPhone, anywhere basically, like everything wants to make you into a cartoon. They want you to make an avatar really bad because they want to be able to harvest that. Like it's easier to harvest the information into bits and to tokenize it because that's a lot easier to train AI and create a giant stomach brain intuitive Sauron for the world. It's basically, that's what Sauron is if you're a Lord of the Rings person. And I did a whole video about that, and I'll probably do another one on managed wellness, how like all of the health stuff that was like enforced as policy during the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius in 2020, 2021, there was a lot of health stuff that was being like becoming mandatory. Now, because nobody, I mean, a lot of people wanted it, a lot of people didn't want it, but now all that stuff that was going to be mandatory, it's now being smuggled into like wellness and like health optimization memberships. I have a thing, it's in my chart also, where like sometimes I'm talking and I just sound drunk. I will like pronounce something completely incorrectly. But yeah, so weird tech stuff and tracking of your biometric data is being smuggled into like, look, it's wellness. This is your health membership. We're tracking all these metrics. That's true about Sauron. I mean, I'm honestly kind of obsessed with Peter Thiel. I find him fascinating. We also have some very similar astrology, which I didn't know when I initially became interested in him. So yeah, there's the technology stuff, like the Eye of Sauron, the Palantiri, those, it is like the myth of Adam and Eve. Like, if you want to know stuff, if you want to not be innocent and give it all to God, then you have to take responsibility for things. You have to take things into your own hands and manage them yourself. And that's like Saturn's connotations with the devil. It's kind of like what a deal with the devil is like, oh, you want to take things into your own hands. That means you're taking them out of God's hands. That means you're deciding that you know better than God. And, as I move forward in my spiritual journey, I'm more and more leaning towards the God side of things. But at the same time, there's stuff that we all need to take responsibility for. So that's very complicated. So thank you for your comment. Sauron just wanted to be a better guitar player, so he met the devil at the crossroads and said, make me that, and turned away and didn't look back. What was I talking about? Neptune and Aries. Oh, the metaverse. Saturn and Neptune going into Aries. That is the metaverse. It's going to become more mandatory. And it's already becoming more mandatory. Like, all the IDs are going on the phone. And, that's digital IDs is going to be a thing you want that's convenient, not a thing that's forced on you. And I'm subject to that convenience. Like, there's so much in my life where, like, having that stuff on my phone is makes my life easier because that's how the world operates. So a lot, like, I feel like it's easy, especially like if you watch me, it's easy for me to go into kind of like an anachronist point of view where like the old ways were better. But we live here now. We were sent to live here, or we chose it, or however that works. And so I heard a perspective. It was Lacey Phillips again, who's kind of controversial. So if you have questions about my interest in that, you can ask. But I don't find her controversial at all. Anyway, she said something about like she was channeling. It's also challenging for me to not reference other people. She was channeling something about like adopt the technologies that resonate with you, and that there's nothing wrong with it. So like AI is coming. It's actually, and I felt this resistance too, especially like right when Pluto moved into Aquarius the first time in spring of 2023, how it's like, ooh, I shouldn't use this. This is naughty to use artificial intelligence. But like the sooner you get good at it, if it resonates with you, the sooner you can like build things on it. That's the direction the world is headed in. Even though like, you know, in some ways, the world that's like building itself is going to crumble. So I don't know what parts of my world are going to crumble and which parts are going to keep going into like getting good at AI is like important. And I don't know what parts of your world are going to do that, but Saturn Neptune is the metaverse. Adopting the technologies that work for you, that is a directive that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, we live here. So, you know, it's like, I'm older. So it's like when like cell phones and smartphones were becoming prominent. Like, you can't really escape it. Like, I had a friend who didn't have a cell phone for so long. Like, he was a holdout for such a long time. And I was walking down the street with him in New York one day, and he just like turned into a store and got a phone and buckled. Like, I think it's going to be like that. It is already becoming like that with artificial intelligence. And, you know, it might be like that with Neuralink stuff. Or, and if you're curious about that, you should absolutely read. Here's a reading list. Here's my Neuralink reading list. It's Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer by John C. Lilly, and Stealing Fire by, I forget, has two authors. I forget their names right now. I know their names. I've read that book a couple times. And I think that's it. There's another book by the same author. Those two authors wrote individual books that are also really good, but they're about specific things. Like, one of them is about like optimizing to be your best. I forget what it's called. And the other one is about like creating ethical cults, which is really interesting for Pluto and Aquarius. Anyway, explore those authors, that reading list. So Neptune in Aries, aside from like glorifying war and having to do with like war and romanticizing crime, we'll see the metaverse coming, and the Neptune piece of the Saturn Neptune, and like the Saturn part is how the metaverse is very mandatory. The Neptune thing is like the way we experience our identity and the identities of others is going to get really weird. Neptune makes things weird. Neptune is about the dissolution of boundaries. So what does that mean in regards to our identity? One thing it means is like our digital self and our physical self are becoming more blurry. And the fact that we have like kind of two selves hooks into the whole Uranus and Gemini thing, which is this summer. So I won't be talking about that at length in this video, but I'm going to touch on it. I lost my train of thought. So that's one version of it, is like we have this like digital self and this IRL self. And like some of us, like right now, I'm not like doing a whole lot of things IRL. I live on the internet. So that's one version of it. Another version of it is agentic artificial intelligence is coming down the tracks really, really fast. So you are going to be an army, which is funny for like Aries. Everyone's going to be this like general of an army of agents. And if you don't have like, the sooner you get on, if it's a technology that resonates with you, the sooner you get on board with like learning how to train agents in the same way you train employees, and like being a boss general of, it's like the Emperor tarot card of these agents, the more of an advantage you're going to have. If that's like something you should be doing. For some people, they shouldn't be doing it. I don't know what the answer is for you. So yeah, that's like the first week of spring. It's a lot of the major action for all of spring. It really starts out with a bang. On the day of the solar eclipse in Aries also. So this solar eclipse in Aries, I talked about it, I guess, already. That like the grand finale of the Libra Aries eclipse cycle is like, it's going to not solidify, but like articulate further how you identify with the Aries archetype. And you should get to know it. In that little course I have that's free, there's like a little section on Aries, but it also like talks about the planets, and the significations of the signs come from the planets. So if you're interested in astrology and understanding the structure of the world through the system of astrology, there are lots of systems through which you can very effectively understand the structure of the world. Astrology is one of them. But if you want to understand it through astrology, and you want just like a quick, or not so quick, kind of long, free thing, you can look at my course. But understanding the archetype of Aries and like the planets moving through it is going to be really important, because it's so activated now with Venus retrograde going through Aries. That's like the intro, the pilot episode, or the introduction, the prologue. That's the word I was trying to think of. Oh, good question. Peach doors. What do I have to say? For Saturn and Aries kids, I would say be prepared to probably take on a lot of responsibility. And also be prepared to like understand what responsibilities are appropriate for you to take on and which ones aren't. Because one thing that can happen with Saturn and Aries is like, you could be given too much on your plate, and that's a different story. Responsibility is responsibility, whether you take it on or it is given to you. That doesn't matter in terms of morality, I guess, whether you abdicate responsibility. But one way you could sort of manage a part of like the Saturn and Aries transit, like that being your Saturn return, a part of it's going to be about like, did you bite off more than you could chew? And does that result in you like then like dumping responsibilities? That's one version of it. Another version of it would be like, you've probably experienced so far, like people in management or like authority positions letting you down, and navigating those experiences. Because that like, I'll get more into this in May, but I guess I'm talking about it right now. Being prepared to maybe be disappointed or experiencing. There's going to be a lot of like, with Saturn in Aries, a lot of stuff that's unfair. And then there's a lot of, I think there's like these rules or the way things are structured is stupid, so we're not going to do it. And the chaos that comes from that, like if the population is, there's also upcoming in early April, this connects to like steering me back to the timeline. There's a Saturn Uranus sextile, and the last Saturn and Uranus have been in like a loose sextile for the past 3 years since Saturn has been in Pisces, but this is like the exact aspect. And the last like Saturn Uranus aspect we had that was exact was the square when Saturn was in Aquarius and Uranus was in Taurus, which it still is. But this is like they're perfecting that aspect with each other before they both move into different signs, which is really interesting. But the Saturn Uranus thing is like a lot of responsibility coming at once, and like I can see like civil unrest, like rebelling against authority, and this could be more constructive coming up in April. But how I'm connecting that to like having what does that mean? You have a natal Saturn in Aries, and like your Saturn return is coming up. One thing I can see is like if it is like, people start to recognize these rules are stupid, we're not going to follow them, and that results in some sort of civil unrest. Well, if you're an authority figure, what do you do when you have civil unrest? You put into place martial law, or you put into place even harsher rules. So like, and then that makes me think of like the thing that they say about like there are a lot of rules put in place in the world that like, this is my Scorpio placements talking, that like they're put into place to kind of make everyone a criminal. They're like rules that aren't really enforced, and they're easy to break, and a lot of people break them often. But if you want, like if the authorities wanted to come after you, then those are like easy routes that they can use. Like, oh, you broke this rule that everybody breaks, but we're coming after you. So I'm just kind of riffing on Saturn and Aries. And then also like Saturn makes things take a long time. Aries is like a flashbang planet or zodiac sign. So you'll get this like tension between like you want something to happen fast, it's going to take a long time. Things that should take a long time are going to happen fast, like the getting of responsibility. And I think that like for the most part, there's so much more I could say about having natal Saturn and Aries, but like, people will judge you harshly. And then you're also probably naturally attuned to judging harshly, and you're here to do that. And this is your time where that's, all the pain and possible victory that comes with that, depending on your chart and the way that you navigate it. Oh, that's very kind. About me being older. I sounded sarcastic, but I'm not. So I talked about, so Neptune moves into Aries. We got through the first half of March. I'll try to go through the rest of this quickly. This will be like up on the channel later too. So April, we're coming out of the chaos and dealing with whatever that was. We start April with that Saturn-Uranus sextile. And I just think like, depending on your chart, that could be like a good responsibility coming forth, depending on what this takes place in Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, and Uranus in Taurus. So it's a sextile, and there's something that strikes me as biological about this, And I have been talking about the Jupiter-Saturn squares, the third of which is coming up in June, as like this managed wellness story where it's kind of brewing under, like beneath the surface. But it will be more apparent in June, I think. As like, something good for your health, Jupiter in Cancer, and like good for your health, good for your body, but something mandatory and iron-fisted, Saturn in Aries. Lead-fisted, lead-iron alloy. So something strikes me as like biological with this Saturn-Uranus sextile, and because it's Pisces and Taurus. And if you think of like just elementally speaking, it's like water and earth make mud. So you can build something with this, and it's not like, it doesn't have to be disruptive, but it will be disruptive in some contexts. But I'm connecting that just in terms of the stuff that I talk about with this managed wellness story. There's something about that like rings the bells of those things I've been talking about, so that has a name now. It didn't have a name when I released my managed wellness video, which you should go watch if you haven't watched. It's kind of all over the place like this, but that has a name now. The name is MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. So all of these things that RFK Jr. has been talking about in terms of health are like, of course, very refreshing. We want to have that. We want to have these discussions. But underneath it, there's a lot of like blockchain and computational law. Blockchain doesn't have to be a bad word, but to me, it has these connotations that are not really talked about. It's marketed as this freedom thing, but it is so easily a tool of like subjugation and control, and also like it doesn't have to be, but it easily can be, and nobody talks about that. The discussion around like RFK Jr. and his running mate, they were both very into computational law. Like Nicole Shanahan is a lawyer, very into AI. That's just like, I could see that there are benefits. I can understand the benefits, but the drawbacks, which seem really dangerous, aren't really talked about. And I remember when RFK Jr. was still running for president, he said something like he said something about how like in law school they learned to observe the letter of the law, like I think he even said the black letter of the law, which is like a very Saturn thing and a very Saturn and Aries thing. If like Saturn in Libra, Saturn is exalted in Libra, a part of it has to do with these like relationships and being nice. Like you don't have to be an asshole, but like Saturn in Aries is like you have to be an asshole. Saturn and Aries people can like easily turn on the asshole meter, and I say that lovingly because like you're here to do that. But this, like the way that this can turn out with like authority structures, especially around war. I mean, I think authority gets more heavy-handed when it's like within a context of war, which is a Saturn and Aries thing. So if it's within, this is a better way to say it, authority can become more heavy-handed when it's within the context of conflict. So that's how that can like function like in a more personal way, but also in a structural establishment way. Excuse me. What was I talking about? I don't remember. Oh, we have another Saturn in Aries person. Oh, I was talking about MAHA. Make America Healthy Again. Obviously, I'm not against it. I'm all about wellness. But I think these things, they're being used to smuggle in other things. And there were things that like RFK Jr. and Nicole Shanahan talked about openly, but there's also this stuff about like the black letter of the law and computational law. And that like connects to like predictive policing, which like that's very Saturn, Neptune in Aries, like ourselves, our digital selves being policed. When Uranus and Gemini comes into the mix, it's like our digital twins are like, it's like a copy of ourselves. It's not just a copy of like, here's a list of your likes and dislikes and what you look like and a like copy of your body. It's a copy of how things function. Like that is what the algorithm is. The algorithm is your digital twin. It is a copy of how you function. It's like a weird mirror. And this Venus retrograde through Aries is like setting all that Aries stuff up. Anyway, excuse me. We have a Saturn retrograde in Leo person. Saturn retrograde too is like the heavy part of any process of building. So it's just like you tied yourself to this, or this is your obligation, and you're in the middle of it. You're not at the exciting beginning part. You're not at the end receiving accolades. You're just like down in it. Oh, okay. So one of our Saturn and Aries people has Mars in Virgo. That's very, that strikes me as very advantageous. I like Mars in Virgo. So at least like, you know, your superpowers, you can be super detailed and like, what's the word I'm thinking of? I can't think of the word, which is funny, like for this Mercury ruled thing I'm trying to explain. I want to say like astute, and sure, that's a thing, but like, and shrewd, that's another one, but I can't think of like what the exact word is I'm trying to think of, but, I think Mars and Virgo is, helpful for like, at least like articulating things. Because one thing Saturn likes to do is like make things real, articulate what is real, being able to articulate what's real and like point out the flaws. Maybe you're like a little too good at pointing out the flaws and that like upsets people. But yeah, I digress. I'm going to answer some questions before I move on. Okay, so one question is, does a transiting Venus retrograde affect individuals with a natal Venus retrograde differently, or is that more dependent on the sign Venus is in? That's a very good question, and it's both. Just a moment, I'm yapping and I need water. So it will depend on the sign that it's in. Like that will affect, because it's like, if you were born with natal Venus retrograde, it's somewhere in your chart by sign, and like, so it's in a house. So all Venus things are going to show up in your life, primarily through that place, whatever that house signifies, and through like in a way that's like art directed by the zodiac sign that it's natally in. So yes, that's always a thing. And the transiting Venus, like Venus retrograde right now, it's going to express through that area of life and wherever it is natally. So it's both. So that's to answer part 2 of your question. And then part 1 of your question, does transiting Venus retrograde affect individuals with a natal Venus retrograde differently? Yes. So in a way, it's kind of a hack. So I have natal Mercury retrograde. In a way, it's like, you're kind of like, welcome to my world. And this depends on like, there's so much that it depends on, like how it, like to what degree, in what ways, it's all very individual. But the basic way that it would affect you differently if you have natal Venus retrograde is like the world kind of becomes like how you experience the world anyway. So it's a little bit of like a hidden gift in having a retrograde inner planet. And by inner planet, I mean, I'm counting Mars with this, even though it's technically not inner. But it's within the Kuiper belt, so it's inner in that way. Those planets, like Jupiter, Saturn, everything outside of that, those retrograde are not necessarily like rebellious in the way that inner planet retrogrades are. But if you have an inner planet retrograde, it's just like you might even find that you're better at operating in this context because it's familiar, or and also like I think I said this in a short form video I did, and I might have deleted it because it got too long, because every time I try to make a short form video, it's like 3 minutes and I need longer to talk. So I might have deleted it. But I did say something, so it might not have actually shown up in a post, about how like if you have natal Venus retrograde, then this time is Venus retrogrades are always gonna be important to you. You might find that you meet someone during Venus retrograde. Like I have natal Mercury retrograde before the conjunction. It's, it doesn't, my mind and use of skill does not operate in the way that I was taught it operates. It operates very differently, and it took me a long time to learn that. But once I learned it, then I understood that like counterintuitively, sometimes stuff that like Mercury rules in my chart, things that I, like if I'm an astrologer, I'm like, oh, I want to elect something, or I want to avoid this time to do things. Counterintuitively, like I don't want to do something or like initiate something before, during a Mercury retrograde, before the conjunction. But in my chart, that's actually like the things come through during that time. And weirdly, it works out for me. So you might find that like, according to like what phase your Venus retrograde is in, that phase ends up being more important. I'm rambling, but like the answer is yes. It does function differently for you. You're going to find that like, if you go back like into the past, you'll find that, important Venus things happened for you during Venus retrogrades. So it's like natal Venus retrograde, that will make Venus more difficult, in a number of ways depending on your chart. But the hidden gift is like when Venus retrograde comes around every 1.5-ish years, you are like, welcome everybody to my world. I did choose a Hermes day for a live stream. What was I talking about? Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like the rambling. So we're in April now. April, the like chaos spikes in March, but I'm careful to say that because like things happen during eclipse season, and you can have like the crazy events or the prominent events happening, right as all these things go exact. But you can also have like the situation changes during that time, and then the changes begin to manifest. And there's this whole, I didn't use it for this lecture, but there's like, I heard this from S.J. Anderson. There's something in, I think, Paul of Alexandria that's like a really good way to delineate when the results of an eclipse are going to come to fruition, and that it's very exact. I didn't do that here, and I should have, but there are like 400 things that I wanted to research in advance, but I didn't, and just going live because I need to practice talking by myself. So a lot of stuff happens in late March, and the situation changes. Even if you don't see it, you may or may not see it. It depends on your chart. And I did not do that eclipse calculation, but okay, I'm going to remove this. I should have I might be able to, while I'm talking to you, change the glyph to April actually. So don't mind me. I'm going to try to get my April glyph up while I'm talking to you. So April, we're starting to get a bit more resolution on, hang on, I can't talk. I really can't multitask. That is difficult for me. Give me 1 minute. Take a bathroom break or something. Or go get some water. I know I need infinite water. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I really would like to get this April glyph up. Whatever, this is taking a long time, so I might give up. Okay, forget about it. I'm not going to do it. Because then I will have to do it for the other months too. So never mind. I have a calendar that you can get. You can follow along. But here, if you want to screenshot April, I'm going to put it up on the... Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. Oh, a better way to interact with the chat. What do you mean? What could be better? Tell me. I need to know exactly what. Okay. So we're in April. Things are starting to resolve. Mercury stations direct April 7th. So the upcoming Mercury stations retrograde after the lunar eclipse in Virgo. So that's interesting. It's a Mercury ruled lunar eclipse with Mercury stationing. So extra chaos. By the time we get to April, things are starting to resolve. So Mercury stations direct in Pisces. So we have this Venus retrograde, and then within that, Mercury stations retrograde and direct, stations retrograde after Venus stations retrograde, and it stations direct before Venus stations direct. in Pisces. So there's a lot of like, this is like, a circle has no end and beginning, but this is like, Pisces has a very, a circle is a circle, but Pisces does have very like ending, like a ring of ending to it. And Aries does have like a ring of like beginning to it. So this is like, we're ending the end of the world. We're beginning the beginning of whatever the new world is. Oh, yeah. So I do have I do have streaming software that I'm using right now, and that's how I could do the overlay, but okay, thank you. I will get it over time. I will investigate getting that all in one place. So, I mean, I think also I was just trying to get that calendar thing up. Anyway, thank you. Please give me all the feedback because I don't know how to do this. Anyway, so like the end, this stuff, these like inner planets stationing direct in Pisces. Neptune has moved out of Pisces. It's going to move back in later in the year. But we're beginning the end of the end. It's the beginning of the very end of the end. And it's the beginning of the very beginning of the beginning. So Mercury stationing direct in Pisces. And then we also have a full moon in Libra, the second week of April, on the day that Venus stations direct. So there's something, this Venus retrograde journey has a like clear culmination. And this also marks like being safely out of the eclipse season, because I don't do like a ton of ritual magic right now because it's too hot. Like my ninth house situation is like too hot. It's way too hot. So like anytime I've done like any sort of like ritual magic and not been like careful, it's like shut it down. So what I'm getting at is like there's eclipse season. We call that like the 2 weeks in between eclipses every 2 months or every 6 months. I'm sorry. But I regard eclipse season as like the lunation before the eclipse. So like this dark moon in Pisces that happened on February 27th. I consider like after that sun moon conjunction, I consider myself in like pre-eclipse season. And if I want to get even crazier, I would consider it like when the sun moved into Pisces on February 18th. Because the eclipses are these like cycles of light. So what the sun is doing and what the moon is doing and what the sun-moon relationship is doing, I'll bracket that eclipse season by like the dark, the lunation before the first eclipse and the lunation after the second eclipse. So this full moon in Libra is the lunation after the second eclipse. Oh, okay. Thank you for the recommendations. I'm using Ecamm Live, by the way. I'm just like, I don't think I'm fully taking advantage of what it can do. I'm just like, I threw it up there and I can have my overlays that I do for my weeklies. But I could probably use like a masterclass in Ecamm Live. Yeah, everything's a cycle, so it is hard to know where to bracket. But anyway, so I take this like system of like the lunation before the first eclipse, the lunation after the second eclipse. That's when I'm really out of eclipse season. Or if I want to get crazy, when the sun leaves the sign that the eclipses were in. I get that from like having kind of like a nascent Western ritual magical practice that was based in astrological timing, under the premise of like, you don't want to be doing ritual magic during eclipse season. That's like, there was this, I don't know what happened to her. It might be that I just like don't know what her handle is anymore, but her handle used to be Astrology for Bros, and she posted this, this is my thing referencing other people too, that I'm trying not to do, but she posted it was like a funny picture of like Looney Tunes, like, you know, the Roadrunner and the coyote, and it was like the coyote sticking a gun into a hole, but the Roadrunner like bent the gun and stuck it out of another hole, so like when the coyote is shooting the gun, it ends up shooting him, and that was like her metaphor for doing magic during eclipse season. So that's where I get that like lunation bracket, because it's like defining like when the light is like truly safe again to manipulate, although like as discussed further, I don't know so much about like directly manipulating things. I feel like trusting is more like Abraham Hicks, let go of the oars. Let go of the oars, everything you want is downstream. But I don't know. I also have like, my chart is very like, you're supposed to do that stuff and tinker with it and be dangerously experimental. So, I was going to pull up a reference and I don't remember what it was. Anyway, so April, we have that full moon when Venus stations direct. So if this is a Venus-ruled year for you, or you're a Venus-ruled person, this journey, this like Venus retrograde journey, is going to be particularly well-defined. And whereas Venus stations retrograde in her sign of detriment, not really having the resources, unless you can manage to just be like fiercely independent in a way that you'd rather not be if you're a Venus-ruled person. Venus stations direct in her sign of exaltation, on or near her degree of exact degree of exaltation. And it's during a full moon in Libra. So this is the thing that you're saying where I need to have everything all on one screen. And I do, because like I know, and when I do consultations, I have my like wheel pulled up on the screen so you can see it, but I don't have that right now. And there are so many details, and I am so appreciative of you bearing with me. But this full moon in Libra is, so like we have Venus stationing and something is coming. It's like, not only is Venus stationing and this is signaling like a successful end of a journey, or like like making it successfully through an ordeal, finding success. And it's Venus is conjunct Saturn during her station and during this full moon. So not only is it like a successful, like it marks like the end of this Venus retrograde is like, turns out well somehow. Although Saturn is connected to like limitation, and can be like endings, and it can be like restriction. It's exalted Venus conjoining Saturn. So in some ways, like, yes, there will be restriction and endings and limitations, but I don't think the endings are necessarily bad. And Saturn makes things take a while. So this could be like things coming into fruition that have taken a long time, like that have taken like, it could have taken a whole Saturn cycle, like 30 years to come into being. And Venus is about embodied like pleasure that's embodied. It's about things that you can experience with your senses. Music, poetry, art, visual art, massage, food. So there, and Saturn makes things real, like physically real. And the moon, a full moon, marks the culmination of sorry. Yeah, I do need to have that's really good feedback, actually, for next time. Thank you. The full moon, like the moon makes things real. Moon is activator of the zodiac. So there's something like, if there's something in your life connected to Venus, maybe you have been working on for a long time. The end of this Venus retrograde journey is not just the end of this like 40-day and 40-night journey. It's the culmination of something much longer because of the connection to Saturn. And it marks, like, it has several, in astrology, when you have like more than one marker for something, you can be really confident that that thing is going to show up in some way. And here we have more than one marker of making things real. So, April 15th, Mercury moves back into Aries. Mercury is direct. So, I'm not really going to talk about that a ton. We just have like, the only thing I'll say is like, this is significant, this like Venus and Mercury retrograde together, moving back and forth through Pisces and Aries, because that's kind of what this whole year is about. We have these big outer planet transits also moving back and forth from Aries to Pisces. Like the planets that move into Aries this spring, they're going to move back into Pisces in the fall. And this like end of the end, beginning of the beginning signature. And so Mercury moving back into Aries. Venus is also going to move back into Aries at the end of April. So just having an understanding of what those places are in your life, in your chart. And something I'll say is like, in my chart specifically, I have a lot of planets around my sun, my natal sun. And so my solar chart is really loud. Like sometimes if I am wondering about what something means in my timed chart, which is just as loud because I have like planets in my first house. If I like turn my chart and look at it as if my sun sign is my rising sign, it's like super literal. It's like a computer printout. So getting really clear on what parts of your life are Aries and Pisces by house. And if you have a lot of planets clustered in one place in your chart, this will be different for everybody. But for some people like me, that part of your chart, taking it as your ascendant. If it's your sun or natal moon with like a bunch of planets. Natal moon if you're born at night. I say that to just like understand what houses, what areas of life are like experiencing these transitions from Pisces to Aries and back again. Yeah, I don't know the answer. That's a good comment about like wanting to wait. Not knowing whether you should wait or not to do something. I don't know the answer because sometimes astrology gives us the information that like, if you wait, then new shit comes to light and you actually have more, you're like better equipped to do the thing if you wait. If you start getting into like electional astrology, I recommend if you want to like go down the rabbit hole, which it'll drive you crazy. I don't know how into electional astrology. Oh, Aries is your 5th house. Good times. If you, that means you're Sagittarius rising, which is also super fun. if you go down the electional astrology rabbit hole, which I don't know how far you are down it, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I recommend the Chris Brennan course on electional astrology. It's like comprehensive and short, and it will send you right down that rabbit hole very swiftly. And then electional astrology will start to drive you crazy, and you'll start to try to elect everything. And then you'll realize that is no way to live. So I remember a quote from Rick Levine. I took a chart interpretation workshop from Rick Levine at NORAC, and he said that like people often come to him and ask him when they should do a thing, and he was like, I don't know, is it a good thing? Then I don't care when you do it. And I really thought that was beautiful, and I use it a lot. But also, like, sometimes astrology, if God has been like, hey, look at astrology, then, maybe you're supposed to have that information and use it and wait. And then sometimes I feel like I've experienced, like, should I do this thing now? I want to do it now, but I feel like the astrology is better later. Sometimes, not all the time, it's the case of where like, well, if I do this thing now, then the things that will develop later during the good time and the opportunities I have to do other stuff during the like time I perceive as better are like greater because I already got started. So that's why I don't know what the answer is for you. You'll have to determine what that answer is. But that's a great comment. Thank you. Yes, electional astrology can be a nightmare. Because it's also, in a way, it's like you not trusting God, the process. If you're like wringing your hands over what time to do everything, which I do. I am roasting myself over that. I still do it. So on April 17th, Mars moves back into Leo. So what part of your chart is Leo? What parts of your chart does Mars rule? Where is Mars natally for you? This will all depend on like how Mars ruled you are in life or this year. But this is triumphant. Mars has been in its sign of fall for months. And we had to do a lot of work in the Cancer part of our chart. And we probably fell quite a bit in the Cancer part of our chart according to like where Mars rules in our chart. So have some mercy on yourself for the ways that like you fell off whatever like habits. Mars for me is like connected to habits. So like there were like good habits that I wasn't doing, and there were like less than optimal habits that I picked up that were like, what, this is not me. So you probably had that for some sort of like Mars and fall, because Mars is like our taking initiative. So Mars in Cancer, especially when it was retrograde, there was like initiatives taken rashly, rebelliously, and then also initiatives passed up, like not taken. And that was a way of being like fallen, having a fall from grace or whatever, or a fall from victory. What would be the Mars thing? A fall from... I can't think of that right now. So Mars moving into Leo is like back into Leo after being retrograde strikes me as triumphant. And I have natal Mars in Leo, so I am happy about that. Also kind of scared because it's still Mars. And it's Mars direct. So we're headed somewhere specific, whatever that is for you. And we're reviewing stuff that happened back in like early December. That seems like such an eternity. So Mars will be in Leo until June 17th. So when Mars moves into Virgo, for our Mars and Virgo person will have their Mars return. So I love Mars and Leo. Like April is like giving us some sort of resolution. Things are getting better after a time of like insanity. And then on April 19th, the sun moves into Taurus. So we're more grounded. We have these, like, Saturn is still in Pisces with the North Node. We're having more of, like, there's still a lot of, like, fire stuff happening, and we have Jupiter in an air sign, but getting some, like, more earth sign stuff feels helpful. Like, I think it will feel like we all have a little more footing in late April. And this connects back to, like, the Saturn-Uranus thing. I forgot to mention this while I was talking about the Saturn-Uranus signature. But on April 21st, the North Node is going to conjoin Saturn. And wow, I just realized that I made all these notes about, like, exact aspects that were happening during this time, and I've just been talking about, like, the big stuff, but I guess that's what I was supposed to talk about. So I was going to really get into the nitty gritty, but I think then this video would have been like 10 hours long. So maybe I'll try to do that another time. But I also do my weeklies, that's exactly what I talk about, is the exact aspects going exact at a given time. So April 19th, the sun moves into Taurus. You can expect, like, you can, like, take a breather. You get, like, some grounding. It's like an electrician has, like, their grounding thing. I don't know what I'm talking about. I think you can get, like, a handle on what has just happened over the past month a little better once the sun moves into Taurus. On April 21st, the North Node conjoins Saturn. So this is really interesting. It's interesting for the Saturn-Uranus sextile in early April because the North Node will be very close to Saturn. And the North Node is very close to Venus and Saturn during this full moon in Libra. But it goes exact on April 21st. And this is an interesting thing to be happening before Saturn moves into Aries a few weeks later. Because if you're thinking of, like, what I said earlier about Saturn in Aries being, like, this, like, I want to say iron-fisted, Saturn's metal is lead, so some lead iron alloy. Does anybody know what the lead iron alloy is? Is that steel? I think it might be steel. I actually don't know. What is steel an alloy of? Anyway. But if you imagine Saturn in Aries as being a little heavy-handed because it's ruled by Mars, and Mars is, like, initiative, energy, drive, force. Mars is force. So Saturn being, like, management, authority by force. If you think of Saturn in Aries as, like, a little heavy-handed because it needs to be for whatever reason, then Saturn with the North Node is also, like, being a little heavy-handed. So there's something about how, like, in mid-April, the story is beginning to change more apparently. I mean, it's beginning to change more apparently immediately as spring begins. But you can kind of see it's really interesting, the transition from Saturn at the end of Pisces with the North Node to Saturn in Aries. Those are, like, they're, like, matching, weirdly matching signatures, and then, like, weird foreshadowing. Steel is iron and carbon. Okay. The question is, April 19th, 2023, there's an eclipse in Aries at 29 degrees. Is there any connection? Yes, absolutely. This eclipse story connects to all the eclipses in, all the eclipses in Libra and Aries. So in 2023, that would have been, I don't have my, hang on a sec. Okay, so yeah, April, that was a eclipse at 29 Aries. So that would have been kind of similar to what that our last eclipse season at the end of 2024, we had a lunar eclipse on the north node in Pisces, but the nodes hadn't shifted to Pisces and Virgo yet. They were still in Libra and Aries. And that happens a lot with eclipse seasons. You get like kind of a taste where it's technically an eclipse and the lunation is in a different sign than where the nodes are. Oh my gosh. So I moved away from Denver and I didn't get to go to East Denver and I really wanted to. I would have absolutely been there. So, yeah, I wanted to go to that. And there's some other like weird blockchain stuff that I really wanted to go to. Wow. Yeah, have I looked at my chart and figured out why I'm shadow banned? I never associated that term with me, but thanks for cursing me with that term. I'm kidding. But yeah, wow. If you saw my chart, it is shadow banned. That's my chart. Everything is in the shadows and subject to hidden power dynamics. And like my life is about like being paranoid. And a lot of times I get accused of being paranoid, but I would say that like at least like 66% I'm right. Oh, and yes. So April 19th was the first of the Aries eclipses, and April 29th is the last. Thank you, Sparkles of Gold. Hello. Thank you for also Thorn, for validating my suspicions. LOL. Yeah, exactly. That's like the theme of my life. Just because they're paranoid doesn't mean they're after me. So, and except when they are. Okay, so we have the North Node with Saturn, and that's like interesting foreshadowing. An interesting signature, like when things happen. It's like with that full moon, with like things becoming real, things culminating into reality. We have a couple signatures for that during that Libra full moon. Venus, ruler of the moon, stationing direct, inner sign of exaltation, with Saturn, who makes things real. So we have a couple signatures for like heavy-handed authority at the end of April, which I would also put that at the beginning of April because these are slow-moving planets. When Saturn is sextile Uranus at the beginning of April, the North Node is still right there, basically. So heavy-handed authority, it's like coming in to the picture a little more loudly near the end of April. And it matches, it like has a ring with Saturn moving into Aries at the end of May. And so on the 26th, we have the dark moon in Taurus. And this is another Venus-ruled dark moon, another Venus-ruled lunation. Now I'm like insisting on pulling up charts and things, which I should have. I underestimated what I underestimated how many things I would want to do to prepare for this. Wow, that's a great question. That is a prediction I would love to take responsibility for. When do I predict AGI will be here? Let me think about that. I don't know if I can answer that on this live stream, but maybe, okay, so my from the hip, like trashy prediction that is just like coming from my intuition, that is just like this is the answer I've got for you right now. I might want to refine that answer later, but like the soonest I would say would be like when the Saturn Neptune conjunction goes exact, which is not this year. That would be one version. But again, that's like my, it's like the thing I said earlier at the beginning of this live stream where like my brain works really slowly and I get a deer in headlights thing. And sometimes that makes it so that I can't answer really easy questions. So there's really like a lot of basic astrology math that I just like, I can't do that in my head right now. But that would have something to do with it. And then those planets are going to aspect Pluto exactly. So there's something about like Saturn, Neptune in Aries aspecting Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is absolutely, every astrologer like agrees and talks about Pluto in Aquarius having this, correlation with artificial intelligence coming into prominence. And one of those things, like my way of working that out, is like, I mean, it's not only apparent in the transits, it's, if Aquarius is the collective, if it's us, that is exactly what AI is. It's us. When you're talking to ChatGPT, you're speaking with us. Everyone who's ever made something on the internet. So I also have my mouse here. I don't have to lean forward. So but then we also have like Uranus and Gemini, and I could go on like as things come into my mind. That's a really good question. I want to spend some time on that. And get back to you on what I really think. But that was my super quick garbage prediction, which there's so much more to factor in. I'm not one of those people. A lot of people can do that really quickly. And I just, right now, I'm not good at that. I consider things deeply. Natal Mercury retrograde trades swiftness for depth. So I will lay on the floor and think of something for 2 hours and I'll get interesting insights that then I use over time. But coming up with things quickly is, it's my thing. It's a muscle to develop. I wasn't born with that muscle strong. Okay, Sasha, that is a very good insight that I agree with. That's what separates people from AI, though. We're going to have to justify our existence, but AI can't be inspired without us. Yes, and in fact, there's a lot of... Yes, absolutely. If AI stopped suddenly, we would all be out of date in 3 years. AI would be out of date. If we stopped suddenly, AI would be out of date. Yes, and in fact, there's a lot of the way that everything is being set up with your digital twin and getting you in to the metaverse and getting blockchain tokenizing every single interaction, where every interaction in the metaverse is a transaction that can be tokenized and logged on the blockchain forever. So you have all this information backwards and forwards in time. What it ends up doing, and I get this from the work of, I'm very into the work of Alison McDowell. If you want to go down a crazy rabbit hole, people end up being the sensors for the outside-in robot. This actually connects pretty heavy to Venus retrograde through Aries and how that introduces us into the metaverse stuff that's coming with Saturn and Neptune going through Aries. Venus being experienced through the senses. Mercury is getting and processing information, but Venus is pleasures experienced through the senses. But I would also just correlate Venus with the senses. It's the embodied experience specifically. I'm working on not saying it's very difficult. What was I saying? What I was addressing Sasha's question. Oh, so we're the sensors for the outside-in robot. The outside-in robot being like the global super intelligence. And Aquarius I forget where this is from, but like there's one delineation for like the sign of Aquarius, or one explanation or metaphor as being a giant. And that's what this is. The outside-in robot. It's a global superintelligence. What you think of as a robot, of these like humanoid robots becoming normal, yes, that's the thing. But another thing that is becoming normal, that is already normal, and we don't really talk about it, is the outside-in robot. It's like the robot is the building. The robot is the whole structure. That is a baby with a baby brain that wants to learn from you being its sensor. And the way that develops over time, over these like this 20-year Pluto transit, is that the people building the outside-in robot who want it, which naturally, like if I were building this is where I would go too. It's like how I was talking about Palantir and Sauron just like playing guitar better than everybody, like someone commented, is like it's a stomach, like intuitive stomach brain for the world. It is the eye of Sauron. It is the Palantir, the crystal ball that you can see everything with and get every bit of information. And it becomes like not just data, but like intuition. Like you can tell what's going on in the collective. It's like the ultimate God mode dashboard. And that information, like the people developing it now want it, like the deep science sector of people developing it, want it to access spiritual realms. That sounds crazy, but there's a lot of stuff out there that's just like being talked about openly. It's being talked about openly, but it's not like being talked about in like the media. And that's how we get to, in my opinion, Pluto in Pisces, of like hijacking the spirit and weird stuff happening with like your soul. There's a thing called soulbound tokens, which is like, that's a token that's connected to you forever. Like an educational credential could kind of function as a soulbound token. It's connected to like your ID forever. And it can't be taken away, and it can't be like sold or transferred. And this connects to like, it's very like, and this is very like Uranus and Gemini. It connects to the idea of like Mercury as, if Mercury is that I'm going on a tangent, and it's a weird tangent. Mercury, one of Mercury's roles is as the psychopomp, which is like the force that guides you like through the underworld into the afterlife. The way you can think about that as not like a mythical guy who is like, come with me, give me your coins on your eyeballs that your relatives left on your eyeballs, and I will guide you through the underworld. It goes from that like kind of cartoon mythos to like Mercury as the psychopomp is the part of you that persists beyond your physical biological self. So when the moon, the body is no longer reflecting the light of consciousness, then like Mercury, messenger of the gods, and your consciousness, Mercury is the thing that helps you persist, which gets creepy when you think about beings dying. Like I lost 2 pets last year that have been in my life like basically my whole adult life. I don't know adult life without them. So that sounds cheesy, but these are beings that like, and on the day each of them died, I had like a vivid dream, like after they died, like not in a way that like, ooh, I had a dream, but like it was real. So if we think about the consciousness persisting after death, there is like in many, I am like on a deep tangent here. Thank you for coming with me. Many spiritual traditions have like the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is like, here's how to navigate. Here's how to use Mercury to navigate your sun spirit, to be the messenger, to deliver your spirit to the place you want it to be delivered to. And like also, how do you, if you want to come back, how can you come back without forgetting all that stuff? How can you come back and actually retain stuff that you learned when you were in this other body? And there are like digital versions of that being developed. So what was the question I was asking? Yes, AI can't function without us. So one of the things is like, I don't know if AI will ever be able to function like in like contact the spirit realm in the way that humans can. That's the thing that has made humans special. Like all traditions talk about humans are special because they're a bridge between heaven and earth. We have the intellectual, the sensual, and the spiritual, and we can function in between them, and we're supposed to. So in that way, AI does need us. And there's like a lot of stuff around like banding together against the enemy of AI that's going to annihilate humanity. And like a lot of astrologers talk about how like, and even people who are just like intuitively tapped in, that like this is a time that signifies like segments. This comes back to what I was saying earlier about words and how words are so powerful. But like Pluto in Aquarius is literally like large swaths of humanity being eliminated. And how can I like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a way I can like heal those words. This is what makes astrology difficult, is like that there is some of that. There's definitely some of like AI being destructive in that way. That is like a part of the symbolism. You can see it coming down the tracks, and you can see it in the astrology. I lost my train of thought. I'm doing the deer in headlights thing. I forget what I was saying. But at the same time, there's a lot of like, a lot of what media does in our lives are ruled by media now, especially if we're living like half to all of our lives online. We're particularly governed by just like whatever the powers that be want to put, like direct our attention to. It's really easy to direct people's attention to certain things. And one thing our attention is being directed to is like, AI is going to kill us all. And in some ways, I don't think that's wrong. I don't think that's wrong that there is potential for like massive mistake, whether it's a mistake or intentional. At the same time, I think our attention is being directed to that while the development of AI, to the extent that the people developing it want to develop it, requires a lot of long-term human activity. Like they talk about running out of data, like they ran out of internet data, but all the like living in the metaverse and having it all locked on blockchain is about like supporting the development of the global superintelligence. So in that way, AI does need us. So that was a great comment. Thank you. I agree with that. Thor News says, I think AGI will show itself in the sky. That's how we'll find out. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for that comment. That sparks a lot of imagination. What is the Guidestones of Georgia stuff? I don't know what that is. Tell me. That sounds interesting. That's an interesting comment about admitting astrology is real. I'm going to have to mull that over. My brain's so full right now. I don't know. I don't like feel equipped to comment on that in like a super thoughtful, detailed way, but I'm going to think about that. Because I also think there's something like native to what astrology is that makes it like inaccessible on a conceptual level to a lot of people, and it's like supposed to be that way. It's like the way that it's useful, it makes it so that it can't possibly be like mass adopted. I was going to say I don't know if I can articulate that right now, but I think I can, and I'm just going to be lazy and not and move on to May. But thank you. That was a great comment too. Okay, this is a good comment. You're more worried about AI stunting our growth. Who wants to draw animation if you can just speak it into reality? If we don't use it, we lose it. That's a really great comment. I think this goes back to the thing I was saying earlier about like what technologies resonate with you and what should you adopt. Like you should adopt the technologies that resonate with you and get great at them. So on the one hand, there is like, you lose the ability to draw. Maybe not. I don't know. But then there are people who like never would draw, who are going to speak animations into existence, and that could be a whole. I always think of like the moon in Sagittarius aspecting Pluto in Aquarius for the next 20 years as like the Centaur Neuralink aspect, where like becoming one with your tools. There's something I've thought about this a lot, and I agree with you. Again, I easily default to like anachronistic ways, like the old ways are better. But also, like I like to play devil's advocate, and I like to find the positive parts of things. I like to not be able to put my finger on where I stand in a opinion spectrum, but so I agree with you completely. And at the same time, I also think, so it's not a but, it's an and. I also think that that's just like we live in this world, and getting good at stuff. Some people are here to preserve the old ways, 100%. Some people are here to get good at these new things, and that's going to help them actually serve the collective better. It's like with social media. Like if you had told me about social media in like 2005. I mean, I was on social media in 2005, but just like how it is now, there would absolutely be a part of me that's like, no, that's wrong. We're going to like get rid of all our real life relationships and just live on this algorithm directed internet. And that's really sad, and we'll lose our ability to connect. And yes, we have. At the same time, there are like people who have like brought information into my life that has helped me, and like both ways would have been good. If it were like the old way, just IRL, that would have been fine. But like, I guess what I'm getting at is like these alternate realities, like both can be good. I'm not lecturing you. You already know all this. I'm just saying it because you commented and I thought of it. Okay, there are a lot of interesting comments that okay, I'm not familiar with the term user construction, and I want to look it up now because that is very interesting. Jody, what do you mean behind a veil? I think just because I lost the thread with whatever that was commenting on, unless you're commenting on the thing right before it, which I don't know. Anyway, so where was I? The dark moon in Taurus is also Venus ruled. So everything about like stuff culminating, coming into manifestation in April, and new cycles of manifestation, generation, and corruption, ending and beginning with the dark moon in Taurus. Both of these things are ruled by Venus. So this like Venus journey that I perceive as having like a lot of potential for success because of where Venus stations and with whom, is still constellating around April during the dark moon in Taurus. April is very much about like, and it always is, but like in particular this year, about like what Venus has to bring, what this like, how we interface with the world through our senses and through pleasure and the things that make life good, instead of just this like consciousness mission where we're here to do things and think things and whatever. Venus is about like, why is pleasure even a part of our existence? And then on April 30th, Venus moves back into Aries. So after being in her sign of exaltation again and stationing there, now we do like, we're doing the run through right now. We're doing like the practice and rehearsal and like getting better at being independent and not having to rely on people. This is why Venus is in detriment in Aries. Like Venus is about togetherness. It's about creating bonds. It's about like accord, and Aries is not about those things. So for Venus to function well in Aries, she needs to be like not about those things, which is like, that could be inspiring for other people to see, but it can make actual togetherness complicated to the point that like you might want to avoid it. And so the month of May will be about like, you learned how to do independence. And it's not like, even though it could be like triumphant, magnetic, inspiring, it doesn't mean that it's gonna like feel good. Sometimes the things that are right, that need to happen, that are like where you're winning, sometimes when you're winning, it doesn't feel good. That's my theme for May, for Venus going back into Aries after this underworld journey. Oh, no, I don't have any Aquarius or Virgo, but I do have Scorpio. I often get mistaken for Aquarius. So in May, we have Pluto stationing retrograde, and that's Pluto in Aquarius. So all that stuff we were talking about with artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. There's another term. What is it? Oh my gosh. I learned another term. It wasn't artificial general intelligence. I'll have to like comment and pin the comment later. In fact, I need to write it down. There's another term that's like, it's not AGI, it's like something else instead of a G. It's another letter, and I forget what it stands for. But I'll come back to that, I guess. But Pluto stationing, that any type of planet stationed, especially when an outer planet stations, it's not like quite the same as an inner planet. You're not going to get that like rebelliousness. You're just going to get like, it's more like a tide, a wave, where like you're in the middle of a cycle. You're in the middle of a story when an outer planet is retrograde. And so Pluto stationing at the beginning of May, there's likely to be something around AI, something about the outside in robot, something about, the impending drone warfare, just everything we were talking about with artificial intelligence is going to be up in early May. And like personally in your life, the secret undercurrents of power are likely to be more heightened. And at the end of the first 10 days of May, on May 10th, Mercury moves into Taurus. So we're getting more of that like groundedness. Everybody hates the word grounded because it's overused, but that's what I'm going to use. I can use whatever word I want. And I don't have the moon in Scorpio. So speaking of the moon in Scorpio, Mercury moves into Taurus on May 10th. And on May 12th, we had the full moon in Scorpio. And this full moon is configured to Uranus pretty tightly. So after a time of chaos, we have it's the moon in fall. A reason why the moon is fallen in Scorpio is you can get stuck in this emotional hole that you can't get out of. And I do not have the moon in Scorpio, but my natal moon is connected to a planet in Scorpio. And sometimes when you have what I think about planets aspecting each other, especially natally, is you can get a flavor, not especially natally, by transit too, is the planets are aspecting each other. So it's not the planet in isolation in a sign. It's the planet connecting with another planet in another sign. So you get a little bit of a flavor of, planet A in sign A connecting to planet B in sign B. Planet A gets a little taste. You get a little taste of planet A in sign B, because they're all connecting. So these archetypes are merging with each other. So I don't have the moon in Scorpio. My natal moon is connected to a planet in Scorpio, and I can understand the trap of why the moon has fallen in Scorpio. Because you can get stuck in a bad feeling and not know how to get out. And so this full moon in Scorpio is connected to Uranus. So there's a double intensity, and it's being loosely squared by the ruler Mars. So there's just there's a tension in May. It's almost maybe there's you break through some surface tension. That's kind of what I think of with this full moon in Scorpio. And it's a stark contrast between these beautiful, possibly, everything's really complicated in March and the beginning of April. So you get what looks like beautiful lunations, or they're perfectly fine in April. I'm not going into analyzing those in detail. But at least there's amelioration happening in April with the lunations of that month. And in May, it's more a breaking of surface tension, a combination of it's tense and you want to break it, or you want to knock the glass off the table, and be fine, be mad. So much has happened with Mars and Venus moving through Mars's sign, and Mars being retrograde early this year. There's in the same way that that full moon in Libra was a very prominent climax to a story. This full moon in Scorpio is the same thing, because Mars has been through so much. And I wonder about this. Here, I'll show you May. I forgot to do that since I didn't put it on. Where is it? You can screenshot that. My thing's not focusing, but. Excuse me. Okay, so the full moon in Scorpio is kind of interesting in May because it's like this big Mars ruled lunation connected to Uranus, squaring its ruler Mars, moving through, finally out of shadow, I think, by that time. I had that in my detailed notes that I'm not even looking at. And we have Saturn moving into Aries the next week. So I think this is a Mars-ruled lunation connected to Uranus, squaring its ruler loosely, Mars, freshly out of shadow, which means Mars has left the degrees that it initially stationed retrograde in. So we're like on a new Mars journey. This idea of like newness with Aries being like new things, it's a cardinal sign. Even though this is a lunation in Scorpio, this is a Mars ruled lunation with like some sort of like surprising thing. And we have Saturn moving into Aries the next week. So I just wonder like what sort of like martial themes swirl about this full moon in May, in the middle of May, that end up connecting to. What does it mean? Excuse me. I'm drinking a lot of water and I'm getting a lot of like frog in my throat. Where like, it's almost like the Saturn in Aries starts a little early. And I was saying that earlier with like the North Node, Saturn joining the North Node and like Saturn connecting with Uranus. But there's something like longer term with Saturn, like Saturn connects with Uranus in April, and then this Mars ruled full moon is connected to Uranus, and you can just see like it seems like there's some sort of development, like Mars is running things and preparing to be the boss of Saturn. So when Saturn is in Aries, Saturn is working for Mars. So it's almost like Mars has prepared some things, some tasks for Saturn to get down to business too, immediately, because that's what Saturn does, is get down to business. So it almost seems like, yeah, Mars has prepared some work for Saturn to begin immediately once Saturn moves into Aries, which that's also the nature of Aries, like immediately, everything immediately. Or it could be that like something is like gearing up to happen immediately and then Saturn moves into Aries, which slows it down. And I think it'll probably be both. Like it depends on what everybody's story is. But like something that you think might be imminent now becomes like bureaucratically delayed to take like, a couple years. Like I was listening to a political speech. It's so weird because I'm not even political, but like these things are just on around me, so I hear them. It's not like I'm looking up political stuff, because I think it's beside the point, honestly. But the current U.S. president said something about was talking about like how great he did it in some bureaucratic thing and how things are happening fast now. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. But he said something about how whereas before he came in and fixed everything or whatever, things would take 10 years just to get denied. And that feels like Saturn in Aries, like something that should happen fast takes forever just to learn that it's not going to happen. So two versions of Saturn in Aries, something happening way too fast, Mars laid the groundwork and things are going to happen immediately, or things like slow way down that shouldn't be slow. And then they're so slow that like even to hear that like this is not going to move forward at all, you don't even find that out until like much longer than you're expecting. Also, the sun moves into Gemini on May 20th. And so Saturn moves into Aries immediately after. So we have Saturn connecting to the sun. So there is like a connection to leadership. There is like something constructive, at least. Like, even if it's just like the management can speak to the leadership. That doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have to be like a good thing that feels good for everybody. It just means that like the management is connected to the leadership. With Saturn moving into Aries at the same time the sun ingresses into an air sign. And right after that, Mercury moves into Gemini. And then we have the dark moon in Gemini. Oh, so I would say, so someone asked about remote viewing experiences during eclipses. I have a couple things to say about that, I guess. I haven't worked with my intuition intentionally enough to determine a lot of the times whether or not something is remote viewing. But there have been some times, like I think anybody who has that, like, who's like, I would say that I was born with intuitive muscles that are more developed than others, but I wasn't taught that that was a thing at all, so I never really knew what it was. And even now, like, I could be working on this, developing this, like, 10 times more intensely than I am. So admittedly, I've been lazy with developing intuitive gifts, but there have been times when I've, like, seen stuff and then later understood that, like, oh, I was actually seeing something. So that's one thing. Like, I know what you're talking about. The second, and I know what it feels like, I think. The other thing is, like, during eclipses, since the light is weird, since you can see things that you can't normally see, it's a particularly potent time for stuff like that if you have a practice. I wouldn't, again, it's easy to connect that to, like, intention and trying to make things happen, which I view as contraindicated for times of eclipse. But eclipses can be times of, like, insane dreams. Like, I've had some of the most gut-wrenchingly possibly prophetic dreams, and, like, just weird dreams. And it's a time when, like, the moon has to do with, like, our subconscious attunement, and eclipse times being, like, being able to see stuff you can't normally see. You can kind of, like, peek behind the curtain. So it does not surprise me that if you have, like, a remote viewing practice, that you had something life-changing during a time of eclipse. I guess that's all I have to say about that. That's really interesting, and it doesn't surprise me because eclipses and weird dreams and strange visions go together. Oh, you said it was super traumatic. Yeah, I've definitely had, like, visions or dreams during times of eclipse that were absolutely traumatic. Like, I had to do, like, I have a pretty well-established Hindu mantra practice. And there have been like dreams I've had where I had to do a couple rounds of like mantra to like wash it away. Like, so I understand what you mean by traumatic. It's super disturbing. So that's actually a really good way to like, it connects really well with like everything I was saying about times of eclipse, where like that can happen in visions, and like visions have like dreams and visions have like a potent capacity to show us really disturbing things, because like all the world's symbolism and all the underworld symbolism and all of the spirit realm symbolism is like your brain's oyster, or whoever is showing you what you're being shown. But you get that same like trauma, like feeling of things being traumatic in real life events with eclipse. Talking about the types of visions you can have is a really good analogy for like, it translates to the real world too. And I'm saying that not for you, but like anybody who isn't familiar with like the potency of a time of eclipse. Wow, Jody, it took you 3 days to get back. I know the feeling. And it's helpful for me to hear that, because I don't really like, I didn't really like grow up or anything with like people who knew what that was. So like, yeah, I've absolutely experienced like taking days to recover from like something I saw or dreamt about, something I saw in a vision or dreamt about. Oh, and then come all, you were in bed for an entire month. Yeah, I know what that's about. I can absolutely be incapacitated by like whatever the unseen wishes to make seen to me. You said something about Mercury and Cancer being connected to 4D. I can kind of see what that means, because like if Mercury is a messenger and about intellectualizing things, and the moon is about the moon is our activator. So in one way, the moon like brings things into life, and if Mercury can travel up into the gods realm and down into the underworld and everywhere in between, if you're doing that in like backwards and forwards in time and throughout different levels of the spirit realm, in like all constellating around like physicality and the body, I can see how that becomes 4D. Oh, Patrick, thank you for saying that live is better than hyper-edited videos. That's very kind, and I will take that to heart, because this was very scary, but it would also be very nice to not have to process my videos so much. And I've gotten that feedback from other sources, but it resonates loudly doing something scary in real time. So thank you. Thank you for your comment. So the dark moon in Gemini, we're almost done. It's only been 4 hours. I'm kidding, but not really. The dark moon in Gemini takes place next to a combust Mercury, and very loosely configured to the impending Saturn-Neptune conjunction that will not go exact this year. And this is the dark moon in Gemini, where it's like things beginning anew in Gemini. And Uranus moves into Gemini in early July. So it's just like not very long after this. So this dark moon in Gemini, Mercury moves in, like the boss moves into Gemini, and we begin, like, it's like we lay our scene. In Fair Verona, we lay our scene. There's this book that I haven't read all the way through called Shakespeare in the Stars, and it's like about how all the Shakespeare plays are like connected to different astrological archetypes, and it's very interesting. And I didn't even think about this when I said it, I just thought of it. But Romeo and Juliet is a Gemini story, because it's about like messed up communication, and there's like two families and two people, and it's like a tragedy of botched communication. And doubles. So I feel like this dark moon in Gemini is like, you maybe won't be able to see it, because in a dark moon there's no light, so it's not apparent that something is like, it's like, this is a gross thing to say, but this is what I thought of. It's like some sort of insemination, where like you can't really see it, but it's happening to lay the groundwork for Uranus and Gemini. So a very interesting dark moon to keep an eye on, but also as hard as you keep an eye on it, you might not be able to see what happens. But sometimes like, I'm like winding down the tech news. I'm not doing like as much of it, I guess, but I'm always like reading it and connecting the dots. So I'm just allowing like the loud stuff. I'm talking about the loud stuff, but I feel like more than likely I'll see like a headline that connects back to like 20 headlines I've seen in the past about whatever Uranus and Gemini is gonna like be about immediately when that happens. And then on May 29th, we get a Mercury Cazimi in Gemini. So that is really nice. And very interesting, given like this dark moon and like what's going to happen in Gemini moving forward. And that's like our digital twin. I did a short about digital twins that you can look at. It's one of my more like insanity posts. But Uranus and like, there's all this stuff about like stuff that happens in the US in relation to Uranus and Gemini, especially every time Mars goes through Gemini while Uranus is there. And I'm not really going to touch on much of that right now. You know where to find where that's being talked about. But I will just say that like the money, like the way we interact with money is going to rapidly change. And the way we interact with identity is going to rapidly change. And that connects to like the Saturn, Neptune, and Aries stuff. But these two things together, like connecting, it's like Uranus is now trining Pluto. So like we're trining the, maybe that's like a part of my quick and dirty AGI delineation. I can't come up with an exact date, but like Uranus trining Pluto. I'm not saying that's when I predict, by the way. I don't know the answer. I really have to think about that. What was I saying? Oh, Uranus and Gemini. That happens in the summer. I'm talking about spring, but whatever. It happens so close to the beginning of summer that I can't not talk about it now. The money, our relationship with money is going to change. And then we have all this Aries stuff coming through. Like our relationship to our own identity is going to change. And one way that you can see that playing out very concretely, this like Uranus and Gemini, Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. And if you have just arrived or whatever, I talk about Saturn, Neptune, and Aries being the metaverse. The metaverse is more mandatory. Our avatars, our armies of agents. How, like, who we regard as ourselves. You can go listen to that. But these two things, the money is changing. Uranus and Gemini. Mercury is commerce, and it's commerce in between people. This isn't Uranus and Virgo yet. It's Uranus and Gemini. So like exchanges, just information, connect the dots. Every interaction in the metaverse is a transaction. This is like the big sentence for Uranus and Gemini with Saturn, Neptune, and Aries is, and this is the truth of technology right now is, identity is a wallet solution. This is a sentence I heard listening to lectures in at the consensus conference last spring, which like Thor, you mentioned, ETH Denver. I did really want to be present at that, but I am no longer in Denver. Our identity is a wallet solution. This really sums up like how the money is changing, our identity is changing. Identity and money are the same thing. Interactions, exchanges, dot connecting are transactions. They are money. That's what blockchain is. It's signals intelligence to help train the global superintelligence. So dark moon in Gemini, Mercury Cazimi. Cazimi is Mercury's exterior conjunction with the sun. So it's more like reaching out, which is so good. Like this isn't an interior Cazimi with like Uranus about to move into Gemini. It's an exterior conjunction of Mercury with the sun. This is Hermes on Mount Olympus. This is like reaching out, getting really excited. And we still have Jupiter in Gemini for like a couple more weeks at this point in late May. And one of the things I said in my Jupiter and Gemini video is we're going to get really excited about blockchain. So I see that constellating around this time, even if it's a dark moon and like the moon doesn't have like a ton of light. So I think it'll be subtle. But there's like really some groundwork about like the groundwork, the 10 lane. There's this like blockchain podcast I was listening to where they were like, I don't understand. There are these 10 lane freeways being built, but like there's no application layer for blockchain. And it's like, yeah, because it's coming. Like this is the application layer. The dark moon in Gemini and the Mercury Cazimi in Gemini with Uranus about to move into Gemini. This is the application layer of the blockchain application, the Web3 application layer coming into fruition. And our identity is a wallet solution. Ourselves, we are money. There was a like Forbes or something article a long time ago that was like, you can securitize people now. Like that's what this is. Like we will not only like be money ourselves, and every interaction in the metaverse is a transaction and thus money. We will be encouraged to like participate in speculative markets, and that will be a form of like signals intelligence to train the global super intelligence. Like one example is, I'm really on a tangent, like Justin Timberlake got a DUI and somebody started a coin called Ticker Cry, and like understanding these like moments in the cultural conversation and this isn't my term, the financialization of culture. It's signals intelligence. It's not just like a weird novel useless thing. It's very useful for training AI. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but there are plenty of like dangerous things about it that aren't really being talked about. The only thing that's being talked about is like AI is going to kill us all. But as someone commented, AI needs us. And what else? Okay, so the dark moon in Gemini and the Cazimi is the application layer, and you are money, and you could be securitized, and you will be a part of social impact bond markets without you knowing, and your children will definitely be asset-backed securities. Okay, I'm getting very unhinged, but we're almost done. I'm going to look at the chat. Okay, so the semi-non-stop jump cuts are difficult to partake of. Thank you. Okay, I'll tone it down with the jump cuts. It's like I feel the need to process my videos. Thank you, and thank you for listening to me talk about it live and process it. It's like a therapy session. It would be great to just not have to do that. Because it takes a lot of time, and I do everything myself. So Patrick, you asked any thoughts about the war. I don't know if you asked that before I said I'm like not here to talk about the war and the USA stuff. You probably wrote that before I said that, and I didn't see it because I wasn't looking at the chat. But yeah, I mean, I agree with it. It's the Uranus cycle is really connected to important stuff happening in the US, and you can time Mars in Gemini with Uranus, like those transits, Mars transiting Gemini while Uranus is there, like stuff always happens. And I totally agree with it. I'm not like an expert in the realm. One thing I will say is I can just add, I guess, to the conversation around that is like so there was a Pluto return of the United States in Capricorn, which we all saw happen. The Pluto return of the U.S. Constitution is around, like the exact, because the U.S. Constitution was written with Pluto in Aquarius. We the people. The exact Pluto return is in 2032. And that is like so many things all at once. It's like the Saturn return of 9/11, and there's a Mars-Uranus conjunction around the exact Pluto return of the Constitution. And I don't know where and it's also the Pluto return of many U.S. states. I don't know where we'll be at that time. I haven't done the math to develop a hard opinion on like when's the Civil War gonna start? Probably right now. I don't know where we'll be at that time, but one thing I do know is that there's a lot of conversation around putting the U.S. government on blockchain, and turning our Constitution into a series of smart contracts. So that's like doing away with the Constitution and rewriting it as a form of computational law, making it the black letter of the law. So that's like, on the one hand, interesting for things like good things becoming immutable, and interesting in a scary way for bad things becoming immutable. And then like everybody's interaction with the Constitution being computational and being, as RFK Jr. said, the black letter of the law. So no spirit of the law. So that's like what I have to add to that is like, I don't know, is that when the U.S. Constitution becomes smart contracts officially, or is that shot down early and it's something else? I don't know, but it's one of the Mars-Uranus conjunctions is the exact Pluto return of the U.S. Constitution, which is, I think, 14 degrees, I think. Yeah, the accepted identities are all political, which is funny because it's very beside the point. I always say, I really like the Frank Zappa quote about politics is the entertainment division of the military-industrial complex, or industry. I don't know which one he said, if he said military-industrial complex or industry, but it is both. It's like, it is the entertainment division. There's important stuff happening. It would be good if that were all that's going on, but tech companies are becoming very much our governing body. There are a lot of good comments. What do you mean by the good cop, bad cop stuff? I mean, I kind of know what you mean, but I've scrambled my own brain because I'm talking about so many things at once. And what is this squirrel coin? I don't know what that is, but I want to know more. And saying meme coins are actually deep. Yeah, I'm saying that, actually. I'm going to actually use that phrase now. Meme coins are deep, because they are. And they say that they have no utility, because it's not like a utility coin if it's a meme coin or a shit coin. But they do have utility as a form of like cultural signal that trains the global superintelligence. Why did I decide to cut back on the tech news delivery? Because it was becoming exhausting to me. I was like, if I had like an assistant or like a couple assistants, I might be able to do that. But like all the work it was taking, it was kind of sucking my soul. And then also the tech news stuff, being like entrenched in it all the time is like kind of like a doom. It's very doom and gloom, and like my consciousness gravitates towards the negative really easily, and tech news takes me down into that. So I'm not going to stop the tech news completely, but it was like dragging me down, exhausting me. It was making simple things feel really hard. And also, I don't know, like, you know, there's an ego part of me that wants to be validated by being like the big nerd and like knowing all this, having this like technology omniscience. But at the end of the day, I don't know if like what I want to be known for is this negative stuff. What is like really in my heart, what I'd rather be known for is like this kind of like wellness piece. And mostly what I'm finding out, it's more about like women stuff, like femininity stuff, which I know is like kind of out of left field right now. But I want to be known more for like, what I want to contribute is like, I want to stand for something positive. And the tech news, it's really easy to like stand for something negative. So I'll never like not talk about tech because I'm always recognizing connections and I want to talk about them. But that's the main reason, I guess. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for enjoying the chat. And thank you for enjoying the hypercuts also. I appreciate that. It would be nice to not have to do them. Was I ever a Goldman Sachs analyst? That is one of the most flattering questions. Flattery will get you everywhere. That's one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me. And no, I wasn't, but that's a very nice compliment, in my opinion. Because I like to cosplay as a business person, but I'm not. Will blockchain stop countries from misbehaving with each other? I don't think so. Because I don't really. I mean, I don't know. That's possible. Because it's once you have everything being logged on a permanent ledger, even though it's verifiably private, you will be compelled to share that data if you have to get assistance of any kind. And if that translates to countries, because countries are beings on blockchain, subject to social impact bond markets, that could actually be a thing. Countries stop misbehaving with each other, but I don't know if it'll be like a holding hands, like totally awesome thing. It might be more of like a nobody can misbehave because we're under the governance. We're under computational governance. So interesting question. Okay, there are a lot of chat questions and I don't know if I can get to them. So I'm gonna get through the rest. I'm gonna get through June really fast, and then since I don't have an assistant fielding things, I will read through the chat. And I thank you for everybody who's still here. Thank you. And if you had to leave, thank you for being here for a minute. I didn't even expect really anybody to be here, so this has been a positive experience. And even if it were a negative experience, it would be positive because I needed to go through it. It's like an ordeal. Okay. So June. summer begins in the middle of June. So these are the last moments of spring, and there's a lot going on. We have Venus moving into Taurus. So this Venus retrograde whole thing is like Venus retrograde through Aries, which is where Venus has a difficult time, and I talked about all the reasons why that's difficult. I also have a separate Venus retrograde video that you should watch if you haven't watched it yet, because it tells you exactly how to navigate it. And anyway, so this Venus retrograde through Aries, which is like Venus retrograding through a sign that she doesn't like to be in, is bracketed by Venus being in her sign of exaltation and then later in her sign of domicile. So it's really easy for me to be very doom and gloom about astrology and tech, but this Venus story just seems good. It seems like the Venus parts of our lives, especially if we cultivate them intentionally, it's really like a good part of the world. A good, like if you have nothing else, you have like the triumph of your independence, Venus direct through Aries. You have like worldly pleasures, attraction of worldly pleasures with an affection with Venus in Pisces and Venus in Taurus. So this is a very like empowered morning star Venus in Taurus. Like not only Taurus is a yin sign, things are brought to you, but this is morning star Venus going out to get, so you can like actually pursue your desires effectively during this time. And like there's a lot of other stuff happening, but if all this stuff is going to happen, at least Venus is in good shape. And Mercury is also in fine shape at this point, direct in Gemini, even though Mercury is like combust for the first days of June. I keep forgetting I have a mouse here and I don't have to like lean over. So now is the exciting part. We have Mercury moving into Cancer, which is not the exciting part, but that's lovely. That's our, I forget who said they correlated that with something 4D, which having Mercury in Cancer natally, which is interesting. So we have Mercury moving into Cancer, and the next day we get Jupiter in Cancer, and that's very exciting. Jupiter has been in detriment for the past year, and it's been kind of just like all the things. There's like a millennial meme from a long time ago that's just like a line drawing of a guy saying like all the things, and it's very exciting, or it's very like energetic internet drawing. And that was Jupiter in Gemini. And I think I didn't check my emails for half of Jupiter in Gemini, and I'm afraid of my emails now because it was just, there's too many communications, too many plates spinning. But Jupiter has really like been the hype man for blockchain, I think, especially with like the Robert F. Kennedy. I haven't looked at his chart, so I don't know how that hits him. How Jupiter, what that had to do with him. But I feel like looking back, I can see like, oh, like when Jupiter moved into Gemini, I was like, we're going to get excited about blockchain. And then like his whole campaign ended up being about that. It might have been about that when I made the video. Anyway, I didn't like correlate it with him as strongly as I am now looking back. So Jupiter completes its transit of Gemini after this like dark moon and has laid the groundwork, all the hype for Uranus. So that's looking in the past. And you can, I have a Jupiter in Gemini video if you want to watch what, like, put together, connect the dots in the past. 'Cause sometimes that's helpful. Like, reading like past outer planet or like slower moving planet horoscopes has helped me in the past, like connect the dots about what certain parts of my life were about. And so Jupiter is moving into Cancer. This is a much more like whatever part of your life is the sign of Cancer, you're going to find like more support. Although I forget when the conjunction is. Oh, oh yeah, June 24th. So Jupiter is combust as Jupiter moves into Cancer. So completing a cycle. So I think Jupiter won't be not combust until like July or something. Okay, I'm really sorry about this. I need to. I have to pee. Biology break. Thank you. Oh. Okay, I thought I could make it till the end of this because I am almost done, but I cannot think. And so something I learned about doing a live thing is like, one, I need a biology break slide to put up if I need to leave for a moment. Two, I need to like not drink 2 gallons of water. I need to be mindful of that. And 3, it could be like not so long. This is like 4 hours long now. Thank you for being here. What was I talking about? Jupiter in Cancer. You'll find that the Cancer part of your life is much more like supportive. And Jupiter is combust for the first part. So it's kind of like, it's weird because like Jupiter enters Cancer, but Jupiter is closing down a cycle. So the end of that cycle will be June 24th. And Jupiter moving into Cancer at the end of the cycle is very interesting. So although Jupiter is combust, the end of the cycle is kind of characterized by like, you got like, awards or accolades or like advances that maybe you didn't earn, but it's like the like hopeful Jupiter stuff at the beginning of the cycle. And then there's the middle where you have to like make good on that stuff, and the end where you like can get like rewarded or recognition or whatever Jupiter's version of abstract success is at the end of the cycle. So after Jupiter stations direct, before Jupiter's conjunction with the sun. But this is interesting that like at the very end of this cycle, even though Jupiter is combust, Jupiter enters the sign of its exaltation. So that's just interesting for like closing down the Jupiter cycle, like what like good extras are available. And also when Jupiter stops being combust and it's like at the beginning of the cycle, which is into the summer, which we're just talking about spring today. Interesting to like wonder about like what sorts of benefits, like advanced benefits, Jupiter will have to offer at the beginning of the next cycle, but that's getting ahead of myself. So Jupiter enters Cancer. The shorthand of that is like, it's really good. And Jupiter does well in Cancer because it's like, Cancer invests and protects. And so when Jupiter is there, like taking care, whether that's taking care of other people or taking care of the self, or just in the sphere of cultivation, this like spiral hug, coastal grandmother, having the archetype of Jupiter there is like the most helpful. It's like the best thing for Jupiter to help with. And that's why Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. That's a very quick and dirty explanation of why I'm still a little frazzled from like having to leave this for a biology break, because I'm nervous about being a human and not just like a cartoon avatar who lives in the internet. So on June 11th, we had the full moon in Sagittarius, which is always a fun summer full moon. I mean, not always, it depends. So this full moon is just kind of loosely sextile Mars, and that's it. So boring. It's a boring full moon. I'm kidding. It looks like it could possibly be fun. I just don't have a ton to say about it. I'm riffing, and I've been talking a long time. And I've gotten through like the most interesting part of the spring, in my opinion. So the other thing I'll say is like, I might be reaching, but I think this full moon is still interesting, an interesting continuation of that dark moon in Gemini, because like we know like what's coming in Gemini. It's all that stuff I was talking about a few minutes ago with like the dark moon in Gemini and Uranus and the money and your identity is money, and that's what the world is becoming. And a full moon in Sagittarius right after. This year in particular, even though it's in late Sagittarius, it's not like aspecting Pluto in in a tight way, but how I consider every time the moon moves through Sagittarius, when I talk about it in my weekly presentations, the moon aspecting Pluto in Aquarius from Sagittarius is like the Neuralink aspect. So there's something like in Gemini, it's like we're laying the groundwork for the tools, and the full moon in Sagittarius is like our like merging with the tools. You know, it's like if you drive a car, if you have a car you've driven for a long time, like that car is a part of you. And there's something here about this story in the world. And again, I don't know if that's reaching. It might just be like because I'm frazzled and I want to like say something. And I'm doing this from the hip. So on June 15th, my favorite, Jupiter squares Saturn for the third time. And this is Jupiter in Cancer squaring Saturn in Aries. And if you haven't watched my Manage Wellness video, please go watch it. The Jupiter, I already talked about this earlier in this video, but the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction to me is like, it's this, what was the Jupiter-Saturn square? What was the conjunction about? There was a lot of like mandatory health stuff. The Jupiter-Saturn square is continuing that, but it's like under the hood and it's embedding it in wellness. There are a lot of other things in the world that this is about, but this is what I'm talking about. And I think it becomes more apparent with like, Jupiter in Gemini was like the hype man for blockchain and these like the tech stuff I talk about. And Saturn in Pisces was like, there is like, if Saturn in Aquarius, Jupiter, Saturn in Aquarius had a lot to do with like, you must do these things for your health, for the collective, for better or for worse. Understandable premise. Saturn in Pisces ended up becoming like a lot of people who didn't even know that they cared about their health or wellness started taking responsibility for their own bodies. And like, there's a lot of other like weird biological stuff happening. Like I think I posted a long time ago about how Saturn in Pisces is like the cell gap junction. There's this like passage between cells that's like, there's a wall there, but things can get through. And it's very Saturn in Pisces. It's like the wall is not a wall, but there's a wall there, but it's not there. So I saw this like laying this tech groundwork hype with Jupiter and Gemini, and then people taking responsibility for their health with Saturn in Pisces, or like this interest that has come around like, well, now we have, and now we have this like blockchain hype man who is doing Maha. So those two things have merged, and he epitomizes the Saturn-Jupiter square to me, the version of it that I'm talking about. There are a lot of other things it's about. But this is the story I'm most interested in because it's not really being talked about. So now Jupiter is in Cancer. So like the hype, the enthusiasm, the like benefit and support is around the biology. But now there's something like heavy-handed and authoritarian about it. And I don't know, like in that Manage Wellness video, I said something about how the first two the first two exact squares are about one thing, and the third thing is about something else. So there's something about how that story is changing. It's like how the Maha story is changing into the computational law. The like, you have to do this. It's good for your health. We're monitoring like all the health membership like startups, or like we monitor 270 or 5,000 different metrics, and that's so good for you. And like, it is good for you, but there's like, somehow you'll be like compelled to do it. That's my vague, I plan to do another separate video about this as it draws closer. And I hope that I do, because there's so many like big things happening that I want to make separate videos about. And then on June 7th, so we have a couple things happening. June 17th, Mars moves into Virgo. And for the past like while, Mars in Virgo has been like Mars squaring Neptune and opposing Neptune and opposing Saturn. But now this is just Mars like kind of hanging out in Virgo, trining Venus loosely, very loosely. And so we get a shift where we're like finally out of that Mars retrograde story completely. This is like all new shit. And everything has changed so much. Like when you wake up on the summer solstice, everything's going to be so different. So knowing about it in advance is like, you can take advantage of things and you can cultivate things intentionally, but also know that like you're going to be directed to where you need to go. Like a lot of this is like, astrology is very seductive in that it makes you think you can control everything, and that can, I'm talking about myself, that can end up giving you, I'm saying you, but I mean me, anxiety about like, if something goes wrong, then you can have like regrets about like how you could have done something differently. But like, so my two main things are like, it's great to know all of this in advance, and you can do stuff about it, and you can take advantage of like, you know, the ways you want to cultivate yourself to wake up to a different you on the summer solstice. How wonderful that you have these like tools and this advanced knowledge. And at the same time, like March is going to throw wrenches into everything. And that I hate, because words are powerful. I don't like saying those things. That makes being an astrologer difficult. So you can have a plan, but be flexible and know that whatever happens was always the plan. So we have Jupiter squaring Neptune on June 18th. And I plan to do a separate video about that. This is Jupiter. So we had Jupiter squaring Saturn, and now we have Jupiter squaring Neptune. So this like, what does it mean for exalted Jupiter, this like biological, physical cultivation, positive situation? What does that mean for it to like get into a car crash with the metaverse? The Maha stuff definitely comes into it. But if like Saturn, Neptune, I keep thinking has a lot to do with like our digital selves and how that is blurry, how that is mandatory, your mandatory cartoon avatar, you're having to train an army of agents just to like get by. How does that interfere with your biology? There's some like pretty easy things that correlates with. And you can take this back to the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which was in April of 2022, for a continuation of that story. Because something like clearly like kicked off around then that now is like you're experiencing the opening square, where like there's a friction between like having coherence and like meaningful, inspiring optimism and coherence in the world, success and luck. There's something about like the idealization of those things, and the fact that like who we are identity-wise in an abstract way is blurry. So that was kind of big. But I'm talking about Neptune, so what do you expect? And on the 20th is the summer solstice, and we're done. And I'm going to try to get through these chats for people who are still here. And I don't know what is like, I don't know what is recent in the chat. So I'm just going to go from where I left off. Oh, so someone has been warned about the civil war in dreams. So that I take that seriously. Curious to know like what were the specific warnings, but those could have been like just for you or for everybody. So, but very interesting. Oh, okay. So at some point on some narrative timelines, we integrate with the central blockchain via neural implants and lose our individual liberty in exchange for global security. That's an interesting sentence because I can see how like have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy where they're like Luke Wilson doesn't have a barcode tattoo and they're like, you're unscannable, and they're afraid of him? That's really easy to like translate to this time where like the it's like a stereotypical like totalitarian, that's such a buzzword, theme of like you have to have these restrictions because it's dangerous for you not to. So it's kind of like we're protecting you. What was I going to say? I had a good sentence and I lost it. Like, see, I'm doing the deer in headlights thing. I lost it. But basically, like, I see what you're saying. Because it's a theme, like, in all things. It's like, it's not safe. I was going to say, like, so any way that you're, like, untrackable or not, like, hooked into the one in all blockchain brain is, like, it's unsafe. And it's like if you're not on the brain, you're thinking with your, like, your meat space brain, your meat brain, then that's, like, the dark web. Like, it can't be controlled. So that's a good comment. Thank you. Oh, okay. So you were saying with the good cop, bad cop thing, like problem, reaction, solution. Yeah. Oh, okay. Rock people, Peanut was shot by, okay, Peanut the squirrel. Yeah, okay. I heard about that. I forgot about that. Oh, I'm so sensitive to that stuff too. Yeah, and they had a coin. Okay, I see that. Very relevant comment. Thank you. And so sad and so awful. Yeah, and thank you. You heard someone say that meme coins are the digital manifestation of fiat currency. Yeah, they're not that different. There's like, they could be like, they could be, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, meme coins specifically being yeah. But I think like all cryptocurrency is like, it's not that different. It like could be all the things that it's being sold as, but it really isn't. But that's interesting about meme coins specifically. Oh, I didn't know that the squirrel coin was like launched even before the squirrel died. Oh, bless him. funny. Because wellness. Changing my channel name. Oh, okay. Yeah. A weekly video like this. Okay, that's good to know, because it might be easier for me to do now that I've like ripped off the band-aid of doing something live. Even though it's really long, like that's my thing. If it's not if I'm not forced to make it short, then it will be super long. And one of the things I like when I edit my videos is like my recording is always like an hour to an hour and a half, and the actual video is always like 19 minutes to 45 minutes. And I always like that it's shorter because I don't want to waste people's time. But if I'm allowed to go buck wild and it's live, then it's going to be long. But you can just be here for some of it. Some of it. Have I ever cosplayed as Phoenix from X-Men? No, but that's funny, and I'll consider it for Halloween. Even though I'm not really a Halloween person anymore. What transit am I most excited for? Right now, there are two. Jupiter in Cancer and Venus stationing on the full moon in her sign of exaltation. Both of those connect to my own chart in important ways. And they're just like, they also happen to be literally just like exaltation of the benefics. Good question. Thank you. Sagittarius is the only optimist of the zodiac. Oh, you're going to see Blackpink in Chicago. That is fun. That sounds really fun. July is fun. Good astrology for that. I don't know. Who else is an optimist? I feel like, I don't know. I don't disagree with that sentence. I don't know if I fully agree with it. Oh, Jupiter has been in your Gemini, in your first house, and the chubbiness expansion is real. That's funny. Yeah, that's real. Jupiter moving through anything connected to your body. It literally embiggens things sometimes. But that's good. I hope it's like healthy abundance. And you'll want to retain some of that for when Saturn eventually moves through Gemini. Oh, so Jupiter square Saturn has been just Blackpink performing in your area. That's an interesting correlation. I wonder what her astrology has to do, or there. There. Sorry, I'm just thinking of the one girl, Rosé. Is mostly what's in my cultural radar, personally. What degree will Venus station direct? It will station direct at 24 degrees 37 arc minutes. So that's, Venus is exalted at 26, because it's the 27th degree. I feel really stupid right now. This is that thing where I don't know the answer to easy questions. But Venus will station at 24 degrees, 37 arc minutes of Pisces. Oh, hello, Leo. How did I get into astrology? Hello from Malta. Wow. I was following this library witch, and I was like listening to her lectures, and she just posted out of nowhere that she was doing an astrology workshop, and I used my birthday money to take the workshop, and I thought like it would be I was like, oh, I've always wanted to learn how to read a birth chart. I just thought it would be a cool party trick because I am not very good in social situations. And so having like, it's almost like being able to do a magic trick. I just thought that would be cool. And when I was a teenager, I carried around this astrology book everywhere, which weirdly I got rid of like months before, like 4 months before I took this astrology workshop. It's so strange. And then there's also this astrology book that I have called Solar Biology that I apparently borrowed from my friend also when I was a teenager. And I had it for a really long time. Like I borrowed it from her for an extended period. And when she found out that I got into astrology, she sent it to me. And it's this like antique book called Solar Biology. Anyway, so I took this workshop and I went down the rabbit hole. And the weird thing is that Saturn was my Time Lord that year. And so that means it's the planet that is activated just for that year. So that means whatever that planet does in the sky is what that planet is like me, and like that planet will have the most prominent effect, for that given year. So Saturn was my Time Lord that year, and on the day I took this workshop, and so in my chart also, Saturn is the only planet that aspects my midheaven exactly, like to the degree, which is funny because Saturn makes things take a long time, and this has taken a long time. But on that day, so Saturn is my Time Lord. Saturn is the only planet that is like touching, communicating with my midheaven to the degree. And on that day, I didn't know this. Saturn was on my midheaven, like exactly. Really weird. Like even the arc minutes were close. So that was creepy and very strange. And I didn't know that, like, because I didn't know astrology yet. So that's like the basic part of how I got into it. Because after that, I didn't stop thinking about it. And like right after, I was like, what is this? I need to know more about this. So I immediately like started looking on Reddit, which is like where I looked for everything. And that's how I found the astrology podcast. And then I went from there. And also I also set up a Slack group which is funny because my 11th, like me and like groups don't really go together, but I set up a Slack group for all the girls in the astrology who took the workshop with me because I wanted to like talk to them and like have like a little astrology group. And it went on for like maybe a couple of weeks, but so I asked them like what they like to read, and one of the girls said that she liked reading Austin Coppock's stuff. And later, like as I was listening to the astrology podcast through Reddit, I was like, oh, and I ended up like taking his courses like a couple years later. So that's the beginning. And thank you all so much for coming. I will answer a couple more questions since I'm here. Christian asked if I'm a fan of Rune Soup. Yes, I'm a member. It is not a coincidence that I talk about the same things that Gordon talks about, because I listen to him talk about things. So he's a very good influence. Oh, and more magic talk on the channel. Okay, well, hopefully you experienced how I find that complicated, but okay, that's a good suggestion. And thank you, everybody, for being here. I appreciate you bearing with me, and I didn't even know if there was going to be anybody. So I'm going to wrap it up now, and maybe I'll do some live weeklies. And thank you all so much again. Okay, take care.